I'm going to discuss a few basic arguments for reincarnation. I think the most convincing proof of reincarnation would be if you actually begin to recall specific and verifiably accurate memories from past lives. One of the best-known methods of attempting to recall past lives is hypnotic regression. But memories retrieved through hypnotic regression are not necessarily reliable, even when dealing with memories from your present lifetime. The mind of the subject becomes highly suggestible under hypnosis and may generate false memories. Of course, if you're interested in trying hypnosis for past life regression, I don't believe there's any harm in it. I recommend approaching it with an experimental mindset. See what happens. People have different results with hypnosis, even when it comes to things like seeing a hypnotist to help them quit smoking. When it comes to past life regression, one person may feel like nothing happened and that it didn't work, while another person may experience very vivid memories that seem as real as some dreams do. But of course, simply having such experiences does not prove that reincarnation is true, and that those are real memories from a past life. It simply means that your mind can create vivid imagery. But if you're able to focus on specific details or information that could be verified, then this could be compelling evidence. And of course, there are many case studies related to past life regression where the subjects have recalled very specific things that were later verified, and that it seems there's no way for them to have known unless they were actually accessing a memory of a past life. It's very easy to find books and articles about this, though, through a simple internet search, so you can do some research for yourself if you're interested. I think that there are enough case studies that we can't easily dismiss them. But this isn't absolute proof of reincarnation. Reincarnation is only one explanation. Another explanation, if we accept that the subjects have actually accessed memories from the lives of people who lived before them, is that they are simply accessing some kind of universal mind, for example. It could be that there's some kind of collective memory bank where every memory of every person who has ever lived is stored, which is somehow accessible to at least certain people at certain times under certain circumstances. It may be that an individual consciousness doesn't survive the death of the body, but the person's memories are stored in some kind of collective consciousness. I'm only pointing out that it's possible to imagine other alternative explanations in addition to reincarnation. So such evidence, even if we accept it as valid, doesn't necessarily prove reincarnation, or even the existence and immortality of the soul. It wouldn't even necessarily disprove materialism. A materialist might offer a hypothesis such as that ancestral memories are somehow encoded in DNA and passed on through genetic inheritance. There are people who believe this, and I'm one of them. Of course, even the three different hypotheses I've offered here aren't mutually exclusive. It's possible that all three are true. It may be that as incarnate beings, we inherit memories from our genetic ancestors through our DNA. It may be that these memories extend way back to our pre-human evolutionary ancestors. It may be that these memories are ordinarily unconscious and express themselves as instincts and primal impulses, but that occasionally they may express themselves within our conscious experience, either in dreams or while we're awake. In addition to this, we may also have immaterial souls, which survive the death of the body and reincarnate, carrying with them memories from previous incarnations. And in addition to this, we may all share a connection with a collective consciousness, or universal mind, which contains the memories of each incarnation of every soul. Of course, such a complex anthropological and cosmological model raises complex questions regarding the relationship between biological organisms and spiritual entities, and the relationship between individual souls and the universal mind. And I'm not claiming that this model is true, or attempting to prove it. I'm just exploring possibilities that are entertaining to consider. But what other arguments might there be in favor of reincarnation? Another argument I think is worth considering is the fact that some people seem to have natural ability to acquire and master certain skills and knowledge extremely quickly and easily compared to others. The idea that man is a blank slate doesn't appear to be true. Of course, some may explain this in terms of genetics, which is consistent with the idea of ancestral memory transmitted through DNA. But if reincarnation is true, that would offer an alternative explanation. It may be that someone who is a child prodigy in music or mathematics was a musician or mathematician in their former life, or perhaps in multiple previous incarnations. I'm not saying that the existence of great geniuses and child prodigies proves reincarnation. I'm only saying that the theory of the transmigration of souls has potential explanatory value. And if a theory has explanatory value, that's an argument in favor of giving that theory some serious consideration at least. A similar argument relates to soul connections. You may have met someone with whom you felt an instantaneous connection. The theory of reincarnation has explanatory value in explaining otherwise inexplicable feelings of harmony or discord toward strangers. If reincarnation is true, this makes perfect sense. You may have a bond with them, or unresolved issues with them, as a result of interactions in a previous life. I'm not making an appeal to authority here, but when people like Plato and other great philosophers from the Western tradition, as well as from the Eastern tradition, believe in reincarnation, I think it's difficult for modern materialistic atheists and pseudo-philosophers to argue that it's an irrational belief, or simply dismiss it without considering the evidence and rational arguments in favor of it. One common argument in favor of reincarnation that I don't think is very good is the argument that consciousness is energy, and that since energy can't be created or destroyed, consciousness must be eternal. If consciousness is energy, can we measure it in joules? Can we convert the energy of consciousness to mass by dividing it by the square of the speed of light? I'm no physicist, but I cringe when I hear people like Deepak Chopra give these kinds of pseudo-scientific arguments to try to defend the doctrine of reincarnation and the immortality of the soul. As far as I'm concerned, these kinds of appeals to obvious pseudoscience only serve to discredit the ideas they're meant to defend. I do think that modern science supports ancient esoteric teachings, but I don't think the law of conservation of energy is useful here. Even if consciousness is energy, it doesn't follow that consciousness is eternal. The law of conservation of energy doesn't prove the immortality of the soul any more than the law of conservation of matter proves the immortality of the body. Let me offer a similar kind of argument based on geometry, though, that I think is much better. To put it briefly, the soul is eternal because it's unextended and dimensionless. The energy argument seems to imply that the soul has extension and is subject to measurement. Isn't that the implication of Einstein's famous equation? We need to go back to Descartes and Leibniz. That which is mental is unextended. That which is unextended is indivisible. That which is indivisible is indestructible, and therefore eternal. An indivisible whole is immutable, because by definition, it has zero parts which can be reconfigured or changed with reference to one another. It is necessarily uncreated because it's irreducible, and therefore there is no more basic unit than itself from which it could have been formed. And again, it can't be destroyed or changed for the same reason. It is eternal. No one can deny that the soul is unextended and dimensionless. It has no mass or volume. Materialists admit that souls have no mass or volume, and they think this proves them non-existent, since they define matter as that which has mass and volume, and they blindly assert that matter alone exists. Yet we can't deny it exists, because its existence is self-evident. I think, therefore I am. So the soul exists. The soul is immaterial and unextended, and therefore the soul is uncreated and eternal. So given that the body is material and mortal, there are really only two possibilities at death. The first is that the body is destroyed and only the soul remains in some sort of disembodied state. The second is that the soul reincarnates into a new body after the death of the old body. At the moment, I can't conceive of any logical third possibility. So are there any good reasons to choose one over the other? I believe there are. First of all, there's the classic moral argument. The moral argument presupposes the existence of God, though. If you don't believe in God, or if you don't believe God is loving and just, then it won't be a convincing argument, but I'll give it anyway. I think most people are already familiar with it. It's basically that if there's a loving and just God, it seems like it would violate his nature to send a soul to heaven or hell after just one brief mortal lifetime. It seems more moral and rational to many people to believe that he would at least give a sinner a second chance, if not many chances. When the disciples asked Jesus how many times they should forgive a man who sins against them, he answers 77 times. Whether we should take that to mean 77 times or 490 times isn't exactly clear to me. I don't know if the "and" means to add or multiply, but if you're a Christian and you believe Jesus was God, and that God isn't a hypocrite who holds humanity to a higher standard than he holds himself to, surely each soul reincarnates either 77 or 490 times at least. There's another kind of moral argument in addition to this. I'm not usually impressed with pragmatic arguments of this sort, but I'll touch on it briefly anyway. In short, if a man believes he'll be reborn again in this world after he dies, then he has an incentive to try to make the world a better place for future generations. If a man enriches himself in this life by destroying the environment and polluting the air and water, for example, he's going to be reborn in that future world. He's making his own future life miserable for himself. If this life is all there is, why should he care? Maybe he cares about his own children, but maybe he thinks the huge inheritance he leaves them will be enough to ensure their quality of life. But if he believes in reincarnation, he will worry about being reborn in the dystopian future he has helped to create. Surely he'll work toward helping to create a better world instead, and not only for his own children, but for all those who come after him, because he doesn't know which one of them he'll be reborn as. Of course, this isn't an argument in favor of reincarnation being true. It's just an argument that if people believe it's true, they'll be better people. So I don't consider it to be a particularly good argument, but I thought I should mention it anyway, because it's similar to the argument some people give for religion. The majority of people aren't necessarily capable of abstract moral reasoning. They need a reason not to steal, kill, rape, and plunder that's easy to understand and that appeals to their own self-interest. I would prefer to live in a rational society that's ruled by reason, but I acknowledge that I live in an irrational society that's ruled largely by faith-based religious beliefs. And while all faith-based religious beliefs may be equally untrue, they're not all equal in terms of their influence on human behavior. For those who are incapable of understanding abstract moral principles, I would prefer that they embrace false religious beliefs that inspire them to love their fellow man than embrace false religious beliefs that inspire them to commit acts of terrorism and engage in endless holy wars. I support every religion that promotes nonviolence, no matter how logically absurd its dogmas may be. And belief in reincarnation does encourage nonviolence, since anyone you encounter may be a beloved ancestor. Any young child could be the reincarnation of a lost loved one. So I do think this argument has some merit. The teleological argument is like the moral argument in a way. The most basic form of the argument is that a belief in reincarnation gives life more meaning than the nihilistic view that there's nothing more after death. Notice that this is not an argument that it's true, but again, merely an argument that believing it will give your life more of a sense of meaning and purpose. It's a pragmatic argument. I've already briefly given both empirical and rational arguments that reincarnation is true, though. So it isn't as if my whole argument is nothing more than simply saying, believe it because it makes you feel good. And I think there's much more to the teleological argument than just that. So I'll talk about it in a little more depth from sort of an existentialist perspective. I've heard it said that the central question of philosophy is the question of suicide. Asking, what is the meaning of life, is really just another way of asking, why shouldn't I just kill myself right now? Natural scientists ask how the universe formed and how life emerged, and what different particles things are made of, and so on. While political and moral philosophers essentially ask how we should live. But the more fundamental question is why we're here, and why we should go on living. Unless we answer the why question, the how and what questions don't ultimately matter. Unless the grand unified theory of everything can give you a good reason not to put a bullet in your brain, it's absolutely meaningless. The materialist is like the man who builds his house upon the sand. When the tide comes, everything he's labored to build will be washed away, and all his toil will have been in vain. Where is the motivation? What is there in this belief system that urges you toward realizing your highest potential? Putting a bullet in your head is surely the most rational thing you could do if you truly believe the absurd dogmas of nihilistic materialism. But what if death isn't the end? What if you have an immortal soul, which evolves from a state of maximum potential toward a state of maximum actualization over the course of many lifetimes? Everything you experience in this lifetime brings you closer to your ultimate purpose. All of your suffering, all of your struggles, all of your striving brings you closer to achieving your divine destiny. How will this belief affect the way you live this life? How will this belief affect the way you relate to others who you understand to be on a similar path of evolution and actualization? You might think that I'm only arguing that it's beneficial to believe in reincarnation, whether it's true or not. That isn't the way I see it. I absolutely believe in the transmigration of souls, or metempsychosis, and I believe there are good reasons to accept the truth of this ancient esoteric doctrine. But for the skeptic, I'm also offering a rational justification for a leap of faith. Suppose you have a terminal illness, and suppose I offer you medicine, which I claim can heal you. I offer you several valid reasons to believe that this medicine can cure you of your terminal illness, but I can't offer you absolute proof. However, if I can at least convince you that there's no harm in taking the medicine, then surely any evidence at all for the efficacy of the medicine is sufficient reason for you to take it. I believe the case for the immortality of the soul and reincarnation is at least as strong, if not stronger than, the case for materialism. What are the arguments against the immortality of the soul? Once you recognize that both views ultimately require a small leap of faith, what argument is there against leaping in the direction of the view which offers the greatest potential reward? In the end, you'll know. In the meantime, you're confronted with a choice. Since I've raised the question of suicide, let's consider what a nihilist might tell a person who's on the verge of suicide. Honestly, what convincing argument can he offer against pulling the trigger? On the other hand, If a man asks me why he shouldn't kill himself, I have an answer. I'll tell him, you imagine that if you kill yourself, you'll escape from your suffering. This is a delusional belief. You'll reincarnate. Whatever suffering you're experiencing in this life is ultimately the effect of your failure to learn a lesson that the universe is trying to teach you. You won't progress until you've learned this lesson. If you don't pass the test in this lifetime, you'll be forced to take it again in the next life, but you'll be starting all over. Imagine that you're in an algebra class and you're struggling with a problem. If you fail to solve the problem that your teacher has given you, or if you give up trying to solve it, your teacher will just give you another problem, which is basically the same. So why throw away the work you've already done? It's difficult, but keep working at it until you solve it. Once you solve it, you'll never have to repeat it. You'll have mastered it. A person commits suicide because he or she believes that suicide offers him or her an escape. What if it doesn't? A belief in reincarnation offers an incentive to face the difficulties and challenges of life, rather than delude yourself into believing that you can simply escape them by killing yourself. There is no escape. The only way out is through. There are certainly more arguments than these, but I think these arguments offer a good starting point. I especially encourage you to consider my geometrical argument, and to research some case studies related to past life recall for yourself. In the information age, it's very easy to do your own research. If you'd like to offer your own arguments, either for or against believing in reincarnation, you're welcome to participate in the discussion in the comments section below. If you've enjoyed this video, please hit the like button, share this video on social media, and subscribe to my channel for more content like this in the future. Be sure to visit my website at illuminatispythagoras.com, where you can make a voluntary donation to help support my work if you found value in it. Thank you. May the light within you illuminate your path and lead others closer to the light. Peace.